The Cold War might have ended 35 years ago, but to be sure, history did not end with it. On the contrary, we are still held at ransom to the classic zero-sum power dynamics, where the strong continues to be invested in suppressing the weak. This is a formula for failure. The continuing tragedy in Gaza, Lebanon, tensions in West Asia, you call Middle East, I call West Asia, and the compounding global effects and the prolonged war in Ukraine remind us on the fragility of peace and the limits of international consensus. These are urgent and pressing concerns directly impacting the very fabric of international order. But this is not all. Great power rivalry in this region, particularly the South China Sea disputes, pose a clear and present danger to maritime stability, placing Southeast Asia, the ASEAN countries, on the edge. Meanwhile, we need to contend with multi-layered threat posed by North Korea on account of its nuclear programs, not to mention its tremendous warfare capabilities, both conventional and cyber. Navigating this strategic uncertainty warrants more than passive compliance or passive acceptance of the state of play. It is duty of political leadership, and I mean political leadership that lead, to provide clarity to this strategic flux and not condone the excesses of realpolitik, let alone contribute to fanning the flames of discord. Nor will we consider appropriate, let alone useful for nations to be coy about the real issues that matter. The elephant in the room must be pointed out. We shouldn't lay blame on the younger generation for their idealism. We need leaders with the courage and conviction to call out the injustices and hardship that continue to plague us and to advocate for a more proactive approach to peace and progress. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, history teaches us that disruption is not uncommon. Long before the emergence of our modern states, the peoples of the Malay world and the Japanese archipelago learned to navigate uncertain waters. As maritime civilizations, we came to understand the simple truth. Prosperity did not come from turning inward, but from engaging the wider world through trade, dialogue, and cooperation. The international system that supported decades of growth and development is under enormous strain. The multilateral trading system, once the cornerstone of global economic integration, faces mounting pressures from fragmentation, unilateral action, and strategic competition. Now, across the global economy, export restrictions and industrial policies are increasingly shaped by geopolitical rivalry. Most troubling is the growing tendency to weaponize economic interdependence. Supply chains, technology, critical minerals, finance, and market access are increasingly viewed through the lens of rivalry rather than mutual benefit. For major powers, these may be harnessed as instruments of statecraft. For many others, however, they become a source of vulnerability. Asia's prosperity was built on openness. Our economies grew because trade expanded, investment flowed, markets became more interconnected. Yet, retreat to nostalgia can hardly be the way forward. The institutions that underpin globalization were designed for a different era. Today's challenges, from economic security to industrial policy to digital trade and emerging technologies, require fresh approaches, and revitalized institutions. The task before us is neither to abandon the multilateral system, nor to preserve it unchanged. It is to reform and renew it. Our task is to hold fast to a system underscored by the principles of openness, transparency, predictability, and a rules-based framework that gives all countries the confidence to engage with the world. But we must also ensure that our institutions remain relevant to the challenges of our time. They must be capable of responding to new realities rather than antiquated assumptions. Now, middle powers have a particular responsibility in this endeavor. We may not possess overwhelming power, but we possess credibility. We understand the aspirations of developing nations and the concerns of advanced economies. We are uniquely positioned to build bridges where others see divides and build consensus where others see discord. Again, build bridges where others see divide, and build consensus where others see discord. And there's a position that we in Malaysia, and I'm fortunate to have colleagues within ASEAN, share this commitment of centrality, of engaging, of viewing the positive outcome of free trade and engaging with all countries and all powers. Now, Asia's rise has been one of the defining achievements of our time. And of course, you are familiar with Japan as number one, the new force in Asia, etc. But no one can deny the fact that in this region, Japan, China, Korea, India, ASEAN, is emerging because of economic integration and expanded opportunities that have lifted millions out of poverty and transformed the region into a major engine of global growth. But it is increasingly under strain. Strategic competition risks dividing the region into competing spheres, forcing countries like Malaysia to take sides. We don't take sides when it comes to climate change or demographic transition or technological disruption. And now we deal with artificial intelligence, the promise and the peril of this new era. It has the potential to accelerate productivity, transform industries, unlock new pathways to development. Yet, it also risks widening inequalities, concentrating power, and leaving many societies struggling to keep pace. I believe friends and colleagues in Nikkei, Japanese institutions, research bodies, have the capacity. Because you come from a tradition, a strong culture and civilization. It's very rooted in your past, but very open to see the future, hope for the future. And I think whilst we crave to accept the challenge of artificial intelligence, we must not lose sight of our own values and traditions and our identity. And that lesson extends well beyond AI. The challenges before us are simply too complex for any one nation to address alone. So rather than capitulation, the answer lies in collaboration, encapsulating cooperation, trust, and strengthening institutions capable of bringing people together. This is why ASEAN remains relevant. ASEAN centrality is not merely a diplomatic concept. It is a practical response to a more fragmented world. It reflects conviction that inclusion must prevail over exclusion, dialogue over division, and cooperation over coercion. Now, Japan has long been one of the ASEAN's most valued partners in this endeavor. Together, we must continue strengthening an open and inclusive regional architecture that enables all nations to prosper. I mentioned in the past dialogue here that I come from Penang, and I can see the emergence of this country in the early 70s, a decade after independence, how we emerge and transform merely by our effective, strong collaboration and trust with Japanese, and particularly Japanese industries. Just be able to transform. Then, of course, when it comes to oil and gas, again, the collaboration, the support of Japanese industries has been able to transform not only that company, but the whole country into a vibrant nation. And therefore, we do value it, and I believe that augurs well for the future of Malaysia-Japan friendship and collaboration. That's why I'm saying that that spirit throughout the country remains true. Therefore, we must ride on the mantra of proactivity over passivity. So when we call and support for Trans-Pacific Partnership, we are encouraged when Japan stepped forward to sustain the initiative and transform it into CPTPP, widely regarded as the gold standard for modern trade treaties. So we will continue to work with Japan and other dialogue partners to bring regional comprehensive economic partnership into force. This is preconditioned on a relationship of mutual trust, genuine aspiration, and political will to ensure mutual benefits to be derived from economic collaboration. So this crucial imperative of geo-economic transparency in dealing with one's partner cannot be overstressed. So ASEAN outlook on the Indo-Pacific. So I remember the Prime Minister's Takichi's vision for free and open Indo-Pacific, and now the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework reflect a common recognition that prosperity, resilience, and stability are deeply interconnected. Framework must be matched by strong leadership, independent, courageous, resolute commitment, and decisive action. And I believe Malaysia and Japan can continue to work together and make a meaningful contribution. In semiconductors, Malaysia's growing strength in assembly, testing, advanced packaging complement Japan's leadership in materials, equipment, and advanced manufacturing. More resilient, integrated technology ecosystem at a time when supply chains face increasing pressures. In energy, our partnership can contribute to Asia's transition towards a low-carbon future while maintaining economic growth and energy security. And thank you for the initiative on Zero Emission Community. Thank you for the support for the ASEAN power grid, Vietnam right through Malaysia to Singapore, and the incoming undersea cable from Sarawak energy to be transported into Malaysia and Singapore and having it transmitted into Sabah, the Philippines, and Indonesia. And this will be done, and I'm very encouraged with the support of the Japanese industries. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I referred and alluded to earlier about maritime nation navigating and sailors. You are aware that sailors of old could not predict the storm. They could not control the currents, nor could they see beyond every horizon. What they possessed was a clear sense of direction. Today, our world does not suffer from a shortage of power. It suffers from a shortage of clarity. Clarity that institutions must be reformed and renewed rather than abandoned. Clarity that cooperation remains preferable to division. Clarity that leadership requires initiative, not resignation. If we remain guided by these principles, I earnestly believe we can transform today's challenges into tomorrow's opportunities. Malaysia stands to work with Japan, with ASEAN, with all like-minded partners who believe that peace is sustained through dialogue, cooperation, and trust. Prosperity is built through openness, and progress is achieved through cooperation. Now together, let us navigate this strategic uncertainty and chart our path forward together. Arigatou gozaimasu.